Right, UFC 300 was actually decent, but you do have to go back to the mid-cards, and here we are. So, Maheshate Hayisaer versus Gabriel Benítez. Very easy to predict. Maheshate is going to KO Gabriel Benítez in the second round. Every time Gabriel Benítez comes up against a guy with power, he fades. Because he just can't strike. He's one of those guys in the UFC who's just there to make up a number. So, not round one, by the way, round two. I can see Maheshate counter-striking. He's not really going to be walking him down because Gabriel Benítez is going to want to be as close as possible to Maheshate so he can get the takedown. And one thing I've noticed from Maheshate, which prevents me from picking him to win in the first round, is the fact that he can be very cautious and he's a very slow starter. Like, look at the fight in the Contender Series. Started off very slow. You look at the fight with Yaroslav Borshev, starts off quite slow, ends up in him getting knocked out. That's a bad matchup for him. A guy who needs to fight a striker. And then you come up against, what was his name, Rafa Garcia, a guy who applies pressure to how I believe Gabriel Benítez will be able to. But the difference is, Rafa Garcia can kind of coil around his body, not in a weird way, compared to Gabriel Benítez, who is less agile now because he's a bit older and he can't take a punch like Garcia. Garcia was bleeding like crazy in that fight. They both had blood all over them. But I believe Garcia's vulnerability to taking a punch is way better than Gabriel Benítez. Too old. You look at his last fight with Jim Miller, just got outclassed, which isn't a surprise considering Jim Miller's quite good and he was on the verge of getting the ranking. But Maheshate's just got the power to put this guy out in the second round, and I believe this guy's grappling is not as good as it used to be. It never used to be amazing, but he's going to struggle, especially because Maheshate isn't going to over commit and he's going to counter and be on the back foot waiting for him to commit and then catch him with the counter right in the second round, which he knocked out Steve Garcia with, and I believe he will do it in the second round. Right, on to the next fight. I'm sorry, I'm just not interested in the women fights. Honestly, I'm not. But James Llontop versus Carlito. No, I'm joking. Chris Padilla. They call him Taco. I'm going with James Llontop, and I am confident. I cannot see a way. No, I'm joking. I'm confident that James Llontop, I know it's a hard name to kind of pronounce. I'm going with a round. No, you know what? I'm going to go with a decision because Chris Padilla, from what I've seen, is one of those grapplers who likes to be very safe. He doesn't mess about on the feet for too long, and even when he does, he's trying to get as close as possible and not take any damage. For example, you'll see him a bit like, do you remember that guy called Dylan Budker the other week? He will try and push you and get you in a clinch against the cage and hold you there because he knows if you're against the cage, you're going to struggle to inflict as much damage as you would if you're at range. But the difference is with James Llontop, he actually can grapple. And he has shown times in fights where he actually wants to fight against the cage. Plus, he's got a mix of Muay Thai, a bit like Daniel Marcos. You could say he's like a clone of him. I'm joking. He's obviously his own person, but he does things that he does, like with the knees, very good leg kicks that he throws. Chris Padilla being a grappler, he kind of walks forward with like a heavy stance. He ain't really loose on the feet. I can see them legs getting chewed up, which is going to force Padilla to grapple even more. But it'll be a lot of hugging, and because he'll be very stationary from the leg kicks, I can see those small elbows by Llontop in the clinch, dirtily hitting him in the head. And it will cause like a gash on his forehead and like start getting a bit of swelling. So I can see James Llontop. There is a chance he could get a knockout, but I do think Padilla's chin is good enough to deal with it, especially because they'll be in the clinch a lot of the fight, I believe. But I believe in the clinch, Padilla's going to be trying to get a takedown by like trying to lower his levels, but he's going to be eating a few punches against the cage. So he'll be clinching. It might look like he's winning, but he'll be losing on damage because he just can't inflict much against a guy like Llontop who's going to have that advantage with his Muay Thai against the cage. So even though you might argue that using your Muay Thai, you want to be at range, it can also work when you're in the clinch positions, especially in like the Thai clinch and single collars. So yeah, I think he'll win decision. Right. Don'Tale Mayes against Chao Machado. I am very surprised with what I'm seeing here. No. Chao Machado, whatever his name is, I'm sorry if I can't pronounce it, I'm not Brazilian. For me, he's going to win a decision quite comfortably over Don'Tale Mayes. Don'Tale Mayes is one of the most, no offense to the guy, but one of the most basic heavyweights out there. Like when you think about low quality heavyweights, Don'Tale Mayes is definitely one of them. Chao Machado fought Mick Parkin. who looks like he's going to be a good guy at heavyweight, although a lot of his fights are quite sloppy. It reminds me a bit like Waldo Cortez Acosta, but I still would say that Mick Parkin's more skilled than that guy. Like, that guy, I do not rate him that much, but he's just made his way up the division. But Don'Tale Mayes is just a guy who's hanged around, wins a fight here and then, loses a fight. But this is not a good matchup for him, which is why I'm surprised why a lot of people have actually picked him to win, because Sean Machado's got very good body shots. Don'Tale Mayes hasn't got the greatest cardio. He will be in the clinch. Like, Don'Tale Mayes, again, one of those fighters where he will fight you in the clinch, no problem. And wasn't this the fight where he knocked Andrei Arlovski out by not even touching him? It was a strange knockout, to say the least. You can see it on YouTube. Chao Mikado is going to be in them situations where, because he engages in the clinch as well, Don'Tale Mayes, Chao Mikado does a bit of dirty boxing. He throws a lot of small, like, body hooks to the body. And again, like I said in the other fights, the leg kicks are very good. He landed like 17 out of 17 leg kicks on Mick Parkin. And Mick Parkin's meant to be a striker, but he was looking to grapple with him because he knew the striking threat was dangerous. And Don'Tale Mayes, to me, his striking isn't anything special. Yeah, he's 6'6", he's big, and just to look at him, he looks like he can fight. But that doesn't mean anything, because Chao Mikado is just a better fighter than him when it comes to everything in terms of technicality, body work, and even striking at range with jabs. Don'Tale Mayes is just one of those guys, if he can land a Hail Mary punch in you, he can win a fight. But I do not see him winning a decision over a guy like Chao Machado. It's just too technical for him. Unless he goes out there and can just bring him down like Mick Parkin did, because Michado's takedown defense didn't look too great, considering that Mick Parkin's not really a grappler. He can do it because he trains with people like Tom Aspinall, and that's a very good guy to have in your like corner and stuff, or in your training camp. But I don't consider him to be a grappler. So Chao Mikado, I think he's going to get the job done by decision quite comfortably, 30-27. Right, this fight here is a hard one to pick. Honestly, like, you might think it's obvious, pick Figlak, but I actually am going with Hubbard, and I beg this doesn't backfire horribly, because one thing I've noticed with Figlak, one, he's been out for a long time. He fought Faraziem, and that fight, if you wanted Figlak to win, that was painful. He got 30-27, ragdolled and slapped up all over the shop. Not just because of that am I picking Hubbard. I'm going to go with by decision, because one thing Hubbard does, which I do not like, is constantly shooting for takedowns without setups and then fail to get good control time on them. But when he gets them down, he does look to do damage, and he's able to do like somewhat some effect, but he can never maintain it for like a whole round. So he can do it in phases, like 1 minute he can hold him down, his opponent will make his way back up to his feet. And Figlak looks quite like bulky and strong. It looks like he's got that steroid build. You want to talk about that woman who looks like a man, I've forgotten her name, Kayla Harrison. Michal Figlak looks like the type of guy who takes steroids. I'm not saying he does, but as Nate Diaz would say, everybody's on it or whatever. I can see Hubbard winning this by decision. One, he hasn't got ring rust. He's got a good jab on him. And again, another good fighter. You've got a few good fighters on here who like to work the body, and Hubbard's one of them. And I think Figlak's one of those guys where he needs to use the cage to bring you down. Hubbard's one, he will shoot out of range, which could be a negative, because if you shoot out of range and you don't set up, you can open up transitions to your back. Like, the problem in his last fight, he fought a guy who had man strength. No, I'm joking. It was just because he got walked down, a bit like what Figlak will do. But I don't think Figlak's got that type of power like Kurt Holloway. I really don't think he does. He's young. Hubbard only really loses to like decent fighters. He doesn't lose to like bums, like Davy Ramos, Vince Pichel. They're the type of guys where it's not embarrassing if you lose to them. But then when it comes up, okay, I don't want to mention any of these because like Julian Lane, like really? I'm not going to count that. But he can beat guys on the way up, but he just struggles against like the higher, they're not ranked, but they're good fighters outside of the rankings who he loses to. So I do believe Austen Hubbard, because of how aggressive Figlak will be, I think he can capitalise on it. And it is going to open up some takedown attempts, which I believe he will get, and do some damage. Michal Figlak will bounce back up to the feet, but then you'll see the ring rust of what I've been talking about. And he'll struggle to be able to bully him and outpower him with the striking, because he's more of a headhunter, Figlak. And I think that won't benefit him in this type of fight, especially off a long layoff, almost 2 years. Right, Rani Yahya versus Victor Henry. Do not put anything on this fight. I'm telling you, even if you feel confident, which I'm very confident in Henry in doing, the odds are just not worth doing. Not only that, look at the amount of upsets we've seen. Weidman against Silva, the guy who we all thought, well, not all, but a lot of people thought, we get chinned. Like, he hasn't looked the greatest in recent years. Goes out there, eye pokes his way to a win. Rani Yahya is an elite jiu-jitsu guy. So it's a fight where I believe Victor Henry, he isn't even that young, but he's got the cardio of a young guy who sets a very high pace. And I think he's going to light up Rani Yahya to the point where he doesn't have that much power, but he could KO Rani Yahya just to the fact of Rani Yahya hasn't got the greatest chin, as you all know. Montel Jackson isn't a joke, but Rani Yahya, I believe he's had a few surgeries. He's been around for a long time. The wear and tear will happen on his body. Victor Henry was looking very good at striking against Javid Basharat. He was undefeated at the time. And people say that Javid Basharat tried to look for a way out by doing the groin kick. Or you could argue that he did Henry himself, but it was really bad. Like, you'd never see a fight end with a groin kick. So I don't know what happened to his balls. But Victor Henry, for me, I think he's going to school Rani Yahya. But it could bite me, because we have seen the type of fights. Guram Kutalate is meant to go out there and destroy Elvis Brenner. Doesn't happen. You think Robert Weidman shouldn't win. I mean, Chris Weidman shouldn't win. You have Kennedy and Chukwueze against Evan St. Preux. These things can happen. And that is what I'm saying. It's not worth it. But if I was to pick a fighter who I believe will win this fight, I believe Victor Henry's Muay Thai and trying to avoid the clinch would be perfect. Because you look at that fight with Miles John and stuff. He's so active. No, Taney Gravely, not. Why do I get confused between them two? He's just so fast. And I believe he can just pick this guy apart and potentially KO him late due to the volume. Hang on, I'm about to gag, but yeah. Do not put anything on it, but I think he will win. Tim Means versus Uros Medic. Something in the back of my mind is telling me to pick Tim Means, but then I'm thinking, wait, he's 40 years of age. He's not that quick anymore. He's got the technical ability, but the speed will be a massive disadvantage. So I've got to go with Medic, and I believe he's going to KO Tim Means, and I think he can do it in the second round. Like, honestly, I don't think of Tim Means as a glass jaw by any means. But what I will say is Nico Price knocked out this guy. Uros Medic, I've wrote him off before. I don't think he should be a moderate favourite. I think he just should be favourite. But the speed on this guy is going to make Tim Means struggle a lot, because he's fighting guys who, they're not that fast. They do not kick the wrist of a guy like Medic. Like, Medic kicks you in the wrist, but because of the amount of power and speed he has, it'll, like, imagine you're holding your guard up. It'll be smashing your hand into your head because of so much power. And Tim Means being older now, his reaction time isn't as quick. But one thing I'll say about him is he's got a good chin. So there is a chance Medic could win by a decision, but I think it's the type of fight where, because Tim Means' like reflexes aren't going to be on point compared to how fast Medic throws, I think he's going to catch him with a head kick and keep kicking the wrist until it makes him lower his hands. And then when he starts lowering the hands, he's going to start working the body, which is then going to make him have to worry about two things. And then that's when he's going to set up a head kick and knock out Tim Means in the second round. I really think he can do that. Because remember, boxers hold up that high, tight guard. And if you can keep kicking the wrist and then start mixing it down to the body, they'll start dropping the hands down and it won't be as tight as it used to be. So I can see him head kicking Tim Means and knocking him out, like, brutally cold. But then there is the other scenario where Tim Means, look what he did to Andre Fialho, which in my opinion, Andre Fialho's just mid. Like, he was nothing special in reality. He put up a good fight against Pereira, but that was about it. And Tim Means has got the technical ability, good, like, dirty boxing, I might as well say. Mixes up elbows, mixes up everything when it comes to striking with his hands. Not too many kicks, and he's not going to really grapple. But Uros Medic lost to Jalen Turner, which in itself isn't bad. He's lost to the two guys where it weren't a striking match, it was a grappling match. And that's what Oroblai, the guy who people say was born in the BC era, he was saying all them type of pitches. But for me, nah, I think he can knock out Tim Means, honestly. Jonathan Pearce versus David Onama. For me, David Onama, KO, and I believe he can do it in the second round, a bit like his last fight. Jonathan Pearce is a guy who, his striking is rubbish. He is on top of you every minute, and not in a weird way. He just keeps shooting in, leaves his chin exposed. There is a chance for a submission like a guillotine, but David Onama's more of an offensive guy compared to a guy who's just going to try and jump into guillotine. So he's going to look to throw like very loose punches in the pocket when Jonathan Pearce is trying to grab hold of him. And another thing, look at that fight with Mason Jones. He held his own very well, considering that Mason Jones looked much bigger than him in there. Jonathan Pearce doesn't look that big. He's quite skinny. You can see his muscles on his back, but they're not like dense and like thick like Mason Jones. And no, I'm not Purple-Aki, but I'm just saying. And if you don't know who that is, type him up. And David Onama, another thing, carries a lot of power. Gabriel Santos got a lot of hype after his fight, after he fought Leron Murphy, because he put in a very good performance in that fight, especially in the early stage. And with David Onama, the way he dealt with him, his submission defense is so good. So for Pearce, the only way I can see him winning is a decision, because there was times when a big Mason Jones had his back. There was times when, what was his name? I've forgotten his name. Daniel Santos had a deep arm bar. He was able to slide his way out. Like, he's got a decent reach, and he's able to use his weight to his advantage, his height. Whereas Jonathan Pearce is just going to keep shooting and leaving his chin open, which is why he got submitted by Jonathan Brito. And I do believe that David Onama's got the elusiveness to be on the outside and just using that like fast but kind of uncanny type of jab, which can actually damage Jonathan Pearce. And that's how I believe he's going to be able to beat this guy in the fight, is by the jab. And then when Jonathan Pearce keeps trying to shoot in, he will slide in that uppercut like he did to Daniel Santos, and I can see him getting dropped by it just because of the sheer amount of power. And I know Joe Lozon KO'd him on his debut, but look at the guys who Jonathan Pearce has been fighting. A bunch of grapplers who... Christian Rodriguez is a good win, but again, he was fighting in a weight class he shouldn't be. Then you look at Omar Morales, like, no, can. And then you look at these two, Makwan and Mirkani. That's a good type of matchup because it's a grappling match. But again, his age is going to be at his advantage. And then you got Joe Anderson Brito here, which he lost. And of course, he beat Darren Elkins. Like, Tony Ferguson would beat Darren Elkins. That's the type of fight he would need at lightweight at this point. But anyways, I don't even know if Elkins is still in the UFC, but probably not with all these injuries. But David Onama for me, too loose on the feet. I think he's going to KO Jonathan Pearce in the second round. Right, this fight here should be an absolute lock. Jhonata and Diniz, I don't know how to pronounce his name. This guy is going to flatline Austen Lane in the first round, just like how Justin Tafa was going to do. He eye-poked the first time, and one thing you have to watch out is Austen Lane will hold his fingers out, which is very dangerous. But one thing he actually lacks is accuracy. And Jhonata Diniz is one of those guys who's just going to be walking you down straight in your face. And Austen Lane, if he misses the first punch he lands, and Jhonata Diniz is able to get a counter on him, as soon as that hand or knuckle touches the chin, I don't care if Austen Lane's got a beard that will make his chin a bit better, he will fall to the floor flat and be knocked out cold. I don't even think there will be any follow-up punches required. I am that confident that he is going to get cooked in this fight badly. Like Austen Lane, he holds his hands way too low. Jonathan Diniz has got good kickboxing. He's fought Rico van Herven, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the kickboxer, who was quite good. He didn't win, but his kickboxing, it might not look too good in MMA. Like, he looks a bit raw. Like, he's not that technical, but he's very good at rolling with punches. So if you go to exchange with him, he'll take your punch, but I don't know if you can take his. That's the problem. And knowing Austen Lane, like the way he got dropped by one punch by Tafa, he got heavyweight, he hasn't got the greatest chin. It is written in the stars for Diniz to knock him out in the first round. Unless somehow Austen Lane goes out there, turns into a grappler, uses the NFL to his advantage. I believe that's where he came from. Not NFL, but like American football. And look to grapple or do something like that. Then he can't win. He will not stand a chance with striking. No way. He hasn't got good footwork. He leaves his back up against the cage. He will get flatlined in the first round. Easy. Right, this fight here will probably get the most amount of viewers because of the amount of people who just, I don't know, idolise this girl, Ariane Lipski. But in my opinion, I don't think she's that good. Like, you look at the wins she's got: JJ Aldrich, Melissa Gatta, Casey O'Neill, Casey O'Neal's a decent win, to be fair, but JJ Aldrich, not really. And you're losing to Priscilla Cachoeira. When you've got Karine Silva, whose jiu-jitsu is so good, to the point where you would think she's a man because of how good, not in terms of looks or anything, but in terms of how good her jiu-jitsu can be at times. And I believe she's one of those fighters, again, where she has good setups for takedowns. And I think Ariane... Silva, I got confused between the two for some weird reason, is going to submit Ariane Lipski in the first round quite comfortably. I don't think Ariane Lipski's takedown defense, I'm going to sneeze, is going to be able to hold up against Karine Silva. And I said I will not talk about many WMMA fights on the card, but this is actually a half decent one. She's got a lot of momentum going into the fight. The only advantage you could argue that Lipski's got is striking, but even then, I do not rate her chances of knocking her out because, one, knockouts rarely happen in WMMA. Plus, I do not rate her chances of knocking out Karine Silva because she's going to be in on them legs, looking to bring her down and be on top of her and look to just demolish her with jiu-jitsu. No messing about. So, Silva for me. Right, this fight here is what I would call the definition of a meme fight, which will be very entertaining. But Ryan Spann for me, I believe he's a striker at heart. No, he's a wrestler at heart who chose to become a striker in MMA because his grappling is good when he uses it. But the problem is he doesn't use it sometimes, and he doesn't use his head. He's very low fight IQ. He really is. But I am going to pick him, and I know it's so hard to pick fighters with not the greatest chins, with low fight IQ. But one thing I'll say about Bogdan Guskov, and I do think he can submit him, and I think it'll be the round one, because Ryan Spann always has a chaotic round one. Always. It's always like, look at that Krylov fight. It was madness. Jumping on top of all each other and looking for submission attempts. He almost gets one. Krylov gets it. And then you look at the fight of Anthony Smith and think, right, this guy's decision-making is quite dumb. You've hurt him. You've got him down. Why are you hugging him? Do you find him attractive? Why are you hugging him? Do something. Don't just lie on him. Do something. And don't just say he was breathing, because he had all the time in the world, but it was you just thought, let me just hug him. No, you don't do it for that long. Yeah, you can do it to breathe, but you're in a fight. You're not there to have a mother's meeting. You're not. And then you've got Bogdan Guskov, in my opinion, who his power is very good. His striking, he can put out Ryan Spann. There's a high chance that he puts him out. But I just don't see where you think Ryan Spann will knock him out. He won't. Guskov, although he's a can crusher, the power he has and the way he can throw hooks, Ryan Spann leaves his chin wide open. I know he knocked out Reyes, but Reyes' chin was finished before that fight. He's got a good jab in him, okay. But Guskov was the type of guy who, he can take a punch, but he can also land one. And if I was to pick one, if they both had a boxing match, I'd go with Guskov, because he's got more power than Ryan Spann. Even though Ryan Spann knocked out that guy with a jab, Dominic Reyes, Guskov knocks out people with ease, and he makes it look easy. But I believe, although he looks like Anthony Smith, he's not Anthony Smith. And there shouldn't be anything to worry about regarding his takedown defense, because he was getting hugged against the cage against, what was his name, Zach Pauga. And I think if that's Ryan Spann, he will bring you down. And because he's so chaotic, he will be able to find the neck, because you had a guy like Volkan Ozdemir who never in his career goes for submissions, ends up submitting Guskov. I'm sorry, I've butchered that name. This is what happens when it's early in the morning. But anyways, Ryan Spann, he should be able to easily go out there and just be reckless and shooting for that double. And when he's got his legs tied up, trip him down, advance to the back and get the rear naked choke. Simple. Round one, it should happen. But I just know it's not going to happen deep down. Even though it should happen, what will happen is Bogdan Guskov, Ryan Spann will turn into Curtis Blades and end up messing about on the feet. And then you have Bogdan Guskov, who just counters him with a hook, puts him down. And because Ryan Spann's got no chin, whoever gets dropped in the fight's over. You never see in a Ryan Spann fight, he gets dropped and he's going to recover and end up winning the fight. Nah. Sam Alvey beat this guy. How was Sam Alvey, who people laugh at as a meme and is just there pretty much to smile, outstriking you when you were young? You're meant to be this guy who's knocked out Dominic Reyes. How do you get outstruck by Sam Alvey? His striking is not good. but I can see him going for takedowns. But then again, I can see it going either way. It's a 50-50 fight for me. It's all about how does Ryan Spann use fight IQ, because on paper he should win, but that doesn't always work. So yeah. Right, this is the fight that ruins the card. I'd rather Ryan Spann Guskov main event than this. Like, this is going to be a barn boozer. I'm going with Matheus Nicolau to win via decision. He's not really a guy who I can see knocking out Perez. Like, Perez can hold his own, but Matheus Nicolau is a very annoying fighter to fight because he's very defensive. He's very patient. He doesn't really have a high output. So he will pick his shots. No, oh my God. He will pick his strikes perfectly. I don't know why I said it like that. And that's where it becomes a problem. Because Alex Perez, you saw in that fight against Mohamed Mokaev, he looked like the better striker, but Mohamed Mokaev cannot strike. He's one of those guys who just shoots us for the legs, so it makes it so easy to make your striking look better. Matheus Nicolau can strike, but I believe Alex Perez will gas because, one, he's been very inactive. Yeah, he had a fight recently. It was only about, how long? A month ago. And some people argued that Alex Perez won, which is a debate, but he didn't, in my opinion. I don't think. He might have, but to my knowledge, I don't believe he did. And Matheus Nicolau, for me, I think it's going to be a lot of jabs and leg kicks by him in this fight, honestly. I just think he's going to take his time. He's going to wait for Perez to get a bit frustrated because Nicolau is one of those guys where he just isn't going to throw unless you do something, which is going to make the fight more annoying. And then Perez is going to look to work the legs as well. And we're going to see like a Muay Thai type of boring 5 rounds event, which should be really on a main card or a prelim of like featured. So for me, as depressing as the main event is, the other fights aren't even too bad, to be fair. I'm going with Nicolau to win it via decision. I think Perez will have moments in the fight where his striking looks better, like from round 1 to 2, I can see him winning that. And then round 3, 4 and 5, as we get into these like later rounds, I can see Matheus Nicolau taking over and being more active, but not too active, but just coasting and just winning rounds. So yeah, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.